Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. What happens when a global superpower tries to build a science fiction future on top of a crumbling economic foundation?
That is, that's really the defining economic experiment of our era, right?
Yeah.
Because the outcome isn't just going to shape life in Beijing or
Right.
Shanghai. It's going to directly impact the global supply chains you rely on, the technology in the next car you buy, and, frankly, geopolitical stability for the next decade.
Right, and that's exactly the tension we're unpacking today. We're looking at a fantastic piece of reporting titled, China is Innovative, Its Economy is a Mess. Which will win out?
Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear with you, the listener, we are not just skimming some standard economic report here. We are looking at a really unprecedented high-stakes gamble.
Yeah, high stakes is almost an understatement.
Right. Because Beijing is attempting to replace this fundamentally broken property and debt growth model with a completely new economy, one that's driven entirely by frontier technology.
Yeah, like AI, robotics, quantum computing, electric vehicles. And the overarching narrative here is this massive collision between top-down ambition and grassroots reality.
Yeah.
You have a government mandating a futuristic tech revolution from the top, while simultaneously the foundational economy, the one that employs hundreds of millions of ordinary citizens, is just stagnant.
So let's ground this in reality before we get into the big macroeconomic numbers. Let's travel to a city called Yingtan.
Oh, in Jiangxi province.
Yeah, Jinshi province in the southeast. If
Yeah.
you walk through Yingtan today, you are physically standing at the intersection of these two colliding economies.
It's a surreal place to see right now.
It really is. On one end of town, you've got these old-fashioned open-air markets, street-side eateries. It feels like a rural interior town that modernization somehow just, overlooked.
Right.
But then you walk just a little further south to their industrial park, and you are instantly thrust into the future.
The juxtaposition is just staggering. I mean, you step out of a traditional agrarian market and into a state-of-the-art national communications laboratory.
Yeah.
For the past decade, local officials there have been aggressively dismantling their old copper industry, trying to transform the region into this hub for high-end tech component manufacturing.
And when you look at the raw data, it looks like their gamble is paying off.
Yeah.
By 2025, Yingtan's GDP per person actually surpassed the provincial capital.
Which is huge.
Huge. I mean, a decade ago, their economy was a quarter smaller than the capital, so that's a massive triumph.
It is, but
But yeah, that triumph is masking a severe structural crisis.
exactly. Yingtan is simultaneously being crushed by this brutal property slump and just massive local government debt that's been piling up since the 2010s.
And that makes Yingtan sort of the perfect microcosm for China as a whole right now. We can actually measure the physical friction between these two forces.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs actually ran a forecast quantifying this exact clash.
Oh, right, the GDP forecast.
Right. So they project that China's high-end manufacturing boom is going to reliably add about 1 percentage point to their annual real GDP growth through 2029.
Which sounds fantastic.
It does. Until you look at the drag. Goldman also calculated that the collapse of the property sector shaved a full 2 percentage points off China's growth in 2024 and 2025.
Wow. 2%.
Yeah, and that drag isn't vanishing anytime soon. So for every step forward the tech sector takes, the real estate collapse drags the broader economy 2 steps backward.
It's, you know what it's like? It's like trying to install a state-of-the-art hyperdrive in a spaceship that has a massive hull leak.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. The new engine is incredibly powerful. It's firing on all cylinders, ready to take you to the stars. But the structural drag from the hole in the ship is completely overwhelming the thrust. You're burning astronomical fuel just to keep from falling out of orbit.
That captures the physics of their economy perfectly. And to understand why that hull leak is so catastrophic, we have to look at the old model. The debt in the concrete.
Right, because for about 20 years, that model was viewed as an absolute miracle.
It really was. You had this massive internal migration. Poor laborers from the rural interior moved to the wealthy coastal factories in the east.
But they couldn't stay there, right, because of the internal passport system.
Exactly, the hukou system. They couldn't easily get residency or social services in those megacities. So what do? They send their wages back to the interior to invest in the only reliable store of wealth they had. Property, which ignited a 2-decade-long construction boom that is honestly hard to comprehend if you haven't seen it firsthand.
Right.
We're talking towering, densely packed apartment blocks springing up in the most remote agrarian towns. It was like an economic perpetual motion machine for a while.
It employed, what, tens of millions of construction workers?
Tens of millions every year, devouring global supplies of steel, cement, glass. Local governments were building high-speed rail into some of the most isolated counties on Earth.
But the fuel for that perpetual motion machine was local government debt, and the numbers are mind-boggling. One tally puts local government debt at around 60 trillion yuan. That is roughly 9 trillion US dollars, or about 43% of China's GDP.
And just to put that in perspective for you, the comparable figure for local government debt in the U.S. is about 12% of GDP.
Wow. So 43% is an astronomical burden?
It is. And the critical detail here is the incentive structure. Why did local mayors borrow so much? Well, in China's system, a local official's career survival is directly tied to hitting strict GDP targets set by Beijing.
Like if Beijing says grow by 6%, you grow by 6% or you lose your job.
Right. And if your rural town doesn't have an organic economy to hit 6%, your only option is to borrow money from a state bank, buy some dirt, and pay a construction firm to build an empty apartment building.
Or a bridge.
Or a bridge. It generates GDP on paper, you hit your target, you get promoted, and you leave the debt for the next official.
Which brings us to Guizhou province in the southwest. I mean, they have some of the most dazzling infrastructure on the planet.
Oh, for sure.
They built the world's tallest bridge, right? A 626-meter-high marvel of engineering. But as a consequence, the province is saddled with insurmountable debts, and almost none of these public works generate any revenue to pay back the creditors.
Exactly.
But, I do want to push back on the traditional economic framing for a second here.
Sure.
When Western analysts look at this, it's very easy to just dismiss all this debt-fueled building as a giant foolish mistake. But didn't this massive infrastructure spending physically connect and modernize an agrarian country at a speed completely unprecedented in human history?
Well,
I mean, yes, the debts are toxic now, but those roads, those bridges, the high-speed rail lines connecting isolated villages to global supply chain, those are real, tangible assets, not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
no, you're right. The initial phase of that boom was undeniably productive. It successfully integrated hundreds of millions of people into the modern industrial economy.
Yeah.
The crisis emerged because of the timeline. There's a tipping point in developing economies where you transition from building vital infrastructure to building bridges to nowhere, just to hit those artificial GDP targets.
Ooh, I see.
In China, that transition happened rapidly, but the political mandate for growth never stopped. So today, local governments are functionally paralyzed by debt service. They can't invest in healthcare or adapt their workforce because every spare yuan goes to creditors.
So they're drowning, the property market collapsed, the debt is calling, and they need a lifeline.
Enter the top-down tech gold rush.
Right. Xi Jinping issues a new mandate: pivot from concrete and dominate frontier technologies.
AI, robotics, commercial spaceflight.
And in an authoritarian system, when the leader announces a priority, the entire machinery of the state scrambles to comply.
And the scale of the capital mobilization is dizzying. Over the past 12 years, a national semiconductor fund raised roughly 687 billion yuan.
Government-backed fund managers saw their war chests swell to nearly 400 billion yuan just last year. And the state recently launched a new 100 billion yuan national venture fund for aerospace, brain-linked machines, and quantum tech.
It's just hundreds of billions of yuan flooding the zone. Yeah. And, we have to acknowledge that in specific environments, this brute force approach works.
Like in the big four megacities.
Exactly. Beijing, Hangzhou, Shanghai, Shenzhen, they're magnets for this cash, absorbing an estimated 70% of all AI investment. They already have the universities, the talent pools.
Right, and you have breakout stars like Hefei down in Anhui province.
Hefei is the textbook example of state-directed capitalism functioning as intended. The local government aggressively cultivated several massive corporate champions.
Like NIO, the luxury EV maker.
Yeah, and BOE technology for LCD displays. Their local university spun out iFlyTech, which dominates voice recognition AI. The local government even co-founded CXTM for advanced memory chips.
But Hefei is the exception, right? Not the rule.
Very much so.
And this is where we get to the core dysfunction. When you mandate innovation from the top down across a continent-sized country, you force local officials into absurd situations.
Right.
Let's travel back down near Yingtan to a city just an hour away called Yichun. The mayor sees the directive from Beijing, pivot to tech. So in 2021, the city dumps 2.3 billion yuan into a massive new electric vehicle factory.
Inside a brand new high-tech development zone.
Exactly. But Yichun isn't Shenzhen. They had no battery suppliers nearby, no local automotive engineering expertise.
And the result?
The facility is totally abandoned now, production halted, the whole industrial zone is lifeless.
Because local governments, desperate to grow out of their old property debts, are just slapping the label AI Park or Quantum Hub on empty dirt. They offer tax breaks, pour concrete, and just hope innovation magically appears.
It's like trying to grow a rainforest by just dumping billions of gallons of water on a desert. You can mandate the water, spend billions on irrigation, but without the underlying soil, the organic supplier networks, the venture capital ecosystem, you just end up with an expensive mud pit.
And the absurdities that come out of this are staggering.
Oh, like Lanzhou?
Yes. Lanzhou is a city in the northwest. They are pouring municipal money into commercial spaceflight and building a quote-unquote drone economy.
While simultaneously, and this is crazy, they literally could not pay their public bus drivers for several years.
It's unbelievable.
They told their own bus drivers to go take out personal bank loans to feed their families because the city treasury was completely empty.
Funding commercial spaceflight while the public buses stop running. It's a tragic snapshot of this economic distortion.
Definitely.
And it's not isolated to poor interior provinces either. Journalists recently toured heavily promoted AI parks across wealthy Guangdong province.
And what did they find?
Empty offices.
Yeah.
Or spaces filled with totally normal businesses, logistics, or catering companies who just moved in to exploit the high-tech tax breaks.
So we have to ask, what does this chaotic, subsidized scramble actually do to the broader economy? Because it's actively creating a macro drag and carrying a massive human cost.
To understand the drag, you have to look at the nature of competition here. It relies on a brutal, localized free-for-all. Every city subsidizes its own local EV startup. These companies duke it out in a highly protected domestic market.
And the survivors, like BYD or Huawei, emerge as battle-hardened juggernauts.
Right, ready to dominate global markets.
But the road to forging those few juggernauts is paved with shattered companies and wasted capital. I mean, the share of industrial firms operating at a loss in China hit a record high of around 32% in April.
Almost a third of their industrial base is bleeding money.
That's higher than the peak during the 1998 Asian financial crisis. Corporate debt is twice what it was in 2019. Companies are slashing prices just to survive, chasing government subsidies instead of actual profitable innovation.
And we can quantify that sheer waste. Economists from the IMF analyzed the data and calculated the cost of these distortions over the past decade.
Using total factor productivity, right?
Exactly. If you aren't familiar with that metric, think of it like baking a cake. It measures how efficiently an economy uses its ingredients, capital, and labor to produce a result. Because of this rampant inefficiency, China's productivity was 1.2% lower than it should have been.
And the GDP impact.
National GDP was a full 2% lower because of it.
2% of China's GDP. That is the equivalent of setting $400 billion on fire every single year.
Yeah.
But let me interrupt and play devil's advocate again, because I think the traditional IMF framing might miss the political reality here.
Oh, so?
Well, Western economists view a 32% corporate loss rate and massive capital waste as a systemic flaw. But couldn't this brutal survival of the fittest be exactly what Beijing wants?
You mean as a feature, not a bug?
Yeah. They don't care about short-term shareholder value. They might gladly accept $400 billion in inefficiencies and hundreds of bankrupt EV startups if the final result is a monopoly like BYD that crushes Ford, Toyota, and Tesla globally. It's the cost of admission to global dominance.
That is a really sharp perspective, and it's exactly the geopolitical calculation Beijing is making. They're playing a century-long game of technological chess, not optimizing for quarterly earnings.
Right.
But here is the critical flaw in that grand strategy.
Yeah.
Geopolitical victories do not pay the bus drivers in Lanzhou.
That is the crux of it right there.
You can forge a global EV monopoly, but it carries an immense domestic human toll. Look at the research from political economists like Yuan Ang from Johns Hopkins and Scott Kennedy from CSIS. They highlight a glaring structural mismatch.
Which is?
High-tech, highly automated manufacturing simply does not require the labor of China's 300 to 400 million low-skilled workers.
Wow. 400 million people. That's more than the entire population of the U.S., just structurally locked out of this shiny new economic engine.
Right. The old model, pouring concrete, was highly labor-intensive. An automated robotics factory or an AI server farm is not. And you can trace this geographically.
Oh, how so?
In 2013, inland provinces generated nearly 48% of the country's industrial GDP. By last year, that figure plummeted to 36%. The tech boom is concentrating wealth in a few coastal megacities.
So millions of low-skilled workers are finding themselves with no economic utility, forcing them to retreat to the countryside, sidelined permanently.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most profound piece of this puzzle. The psychological toll on the Chinese public, because this disconnect between global ambition and domestic reality is creating a massive consumer crisis.
The article actually features a striking quote from a former advisor to the central government about this.
Oh, right. He said America has unwittingly cast a spell on Chinese leaders.
Yes, it's a deeply revealing observation. The argument is that this intense geopolitical contest with the U.S. has completely warped Beijing's domestic priorities. They are so singularly obsessed with winning the tech race that they are willfully ignoring the systemic economic rot hollowing out their own working class.
And if you want proof that the rot is real, you just have to look at the consumer data. Retail sales in April grew by a miserable 0.2% year-on-year.
That's the lowest reading since late 2022, back during the lockdowns.
But the statistic is even more shocking. The outstanding value of household bank loans actually fell for the first time on record in March.
Just to let that sink in.
People are refusing to borrow money to buy houses. They aren't taking out loans for small businesses. They are aggressively hoarding cash.
And we have to ask why. Why is the consumer hoarding cash? Because they're terrified.
Yeah.
Think about the everyday lived experience of an ordinary citizen right now. They're scarred by the lockdowns. They watch the property market, where most of their life savings was stored, implode.
And they know the social safety net is threadbare.
Exactly. When your wealth vanishes and your local government is too bankrupt to pay civil servants, you don't buy a new TV. You prepare for winter.
So you can manufacture all the whizzy, state-of-the-art EVs and robots in the world. But if your own citizens are too economically depressed and psychologically terrified to spend money, how resilient is that model?
It creates an inherently fragile system.
Right. What happens to global trade when the second largest economy relies entirely on exporting subsidized goods because its own people can't afford to buy anything?
You can't sustain long-term stability just by forcing high-tech exports while your domestic base rots. The leadership is betting everything that this tech engine revs up before the old property foundation completely crumbles. But as the data shows, you cannot simply mandate consumer confidence from the top down.
It really brings us back to that friction. You've got this incredibly shiny, advanced hyperdrive bolted onto an economy burdened by historic debt. The engineers in the cockpit are cheering because they're catching up to the West in AI, but the hundreds of millions of passengers in the back are bracing for impact because they feel the structure tearing apart. It leaves you with a really profound question to consider. If China does succeed in their ultimate goal, if they win the AI and robotics race and crush Western competition, will it even matter to their internal stability if 500 million of their own citizens are structurally locked out of that future?
History shows us regimes rarely thrive when they prioritize international prestige over the basic economic survival of 500 million citizens. The friction is unsustainable.
Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.